Today's story took place in 2013. I'll refer to the main character as Dolson. Dolson was living in North Korea at the time. She had the surname Jung, and the reason I specifically mention that this happened in 2013 is because a major event took place in North Korea that year, an event that was also widely reported in South Korea. In 2013, Jang Song-taek, who was considered the second most powerful man in North Korea, was purged. During that time, people who happened to have the surname Jang were also subjected to investigations. Dolson had absolutely no connection to Jang Song-taek's family, but simply because she had the same surname, her father was at risk of being taken away. At that point, her father thought, even if I can't save myself, I have to save my daughter somehow. He spent all the money he had managed to save and arranged for Dolson to defect from North Korea. Dolson was only 18 years old at the time. She attempted to escape through a North Korean defection broker. For North Korean defectors, the most dangerous part is, of course, crossing the Tumen River. The second most dangerous part is moving through China. Fortunately, Dolson managed to cross into China safely. When we hear the word broker, we might imagine one person accompanying a defector through the entire journey. But from what I've heard, different brokers are responsible for different sections of the route. There is one broker who helps someone travel from inside North Korea to the Tumen River. Then there are other people who help them cross different sections of Chinese territory. There are many different routes used by North Korean defectors. Dolson chose a route that would eventually take her through Thailand. Fortunately, after traveling through China for about a month, she finally reached the area near the Mekong River. China had been the most terrifying part of the journey for Dolson. It was an area where North Korean security agents operated, and there were also cases of defectors being kidnapped by Chinese authorities. North Korean defectors were aware that they could even be sold into human trafficking while in China. After enduring all of that fear, reaching the Mekong River was the moment when many North Korean defectors finally think, I might actually survive. Thailand was one of the few countries that accepted North Korean defectors as refugees and helped connect them with South Korea or the United States. So when Dolson finally reached Thai territory, she was able to breathe a sigh of relief. She thought, I've made it. I'm finally safe. She was told that once she crossed the Mekong River by boat, someone would be waiting for her on the other side. The broker who had helped her in China said goodbye to her, and Dolson crossed the Mekong River. When she reached the other side, she saw someone who looked exactly like the person who was supposed to help her. The man approached her naturally and said, You just need to come with me. Stay quiet and follow me. Then he took her and put her into a car. After getting into the car, Dolson expected them to head toward a city in Thailand. But instead, she gradually realized that the car was leaving the main roads and heading deeper into the mountains and the jungle. Listening to this story now, we might immediately think, wait, isn't something wrong here? But Dolson didn't feel that way at the time. She had already spent nearly a month traveling through China, constantly trying to avoid dangerous people and making her way through remote areas and jungles. So, at that moment, the fact that the car was heading deeper into the wilderness didn't immediately seem strange to her. After 2 or 3 hours of driving, Dolson sensed a dark shift in the atmosphere. This isn't right. The distance is too great, she thought. The car eventually pulled into the quiet grounds of a neglected industrial site. The moment they stopped, the broker, who had been acting with a facade of kindness, underwent a terrifying transformation. He reached under the seat and revealed an imposing cold object, its presence looming in the silence. Out, he commanded. He forced her to follow him into the shadows. At that moment, Dolson realized her safety had been stripped away. She was being coerced, and the gravity of the situation hit her with full force. But she clung to a single thought. I must survive. She walked into the structure, and the sight inside was chilling. Around 20 people were there, trapped in a relentless, forced production cycle. They were crafting items that mirrored the appearance of Yadom, those common inhalants used by so many. To those unfamiliar, these items look harmless, but the process here was twisted. The site was a front for something dangerous. They were combining potent, unauthorized materials, shaping them to mimic everyday goods, and preparing them for a dark, hidden market. Dolson realized what was happening and thought, so this is an ice factory. Among North Koreans, the word ice is sometimes used to refer to a dangerous illegal drug. She understood that she had been taken somewhere she was never supposed to be. She knew she was in a completely abnormal situation. She had escaped North Korea in order to survive, but now she found herself trapped in a place where she might actually die. But instead of giving in to despair, she thought, "How did I make it all the way here? I have to survive." So she forced herself to stay calm. For 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then a month, she obediently did everything they wanted her to do. She helped them. She cooperated. She tried to make it clear that she had no intention of resisting them. For nearly 2 months, she acted obediently and, in a sense, was forced to assist in their criminal activities. But there was something that continued to bother her. She noticed that the people there sometimes seemed to leave the facility, but she never saw any cars moving. Then she began to think, maybe this place isn't far from the Mekong River. If they weren't using cars, they must have been using some other form of transportation. And what other option could there be? A boat. She reasoned that if they needed to bring in large amounts of food or transport the products they were making out of the facility, the river might be the only way to do it. So Dolson began what she called winning someone over. She started telling one of the men, "I have no intention of fighting you. In fact, I need money. I would rather work hard here and earn money myself. You make a lot of money doing this, don't you?" Little by little, she began to gain his trust. I should mention that this is a difficult part of the story to talk about. From what I heard, Dolson did everything she could to gain the trust of the male supervisors and make them lower their guard. At first, the supervisor was extremely cautious around her. But after about 4 months, he began to think, maybe I can actually trust this woman. As a result, Dolson was given a small amount of freedom within the facility. Of course, freedom meant very little in that situation. She was allowed to leave the room and move around within that floor of the building. She was also given a role similar to what prisoners sometimes call a trustee, someone who is allowed to move between different areas and help with various tasks. That allowed her to move around the floor and observe more of what was happening. As Dolson navigated the facility, she began to salvage small amounts of flammable liquids from the industrial lamps used in their process, a little at a time. She had reached a breaking point. I will create a distraction and find a way out. For 3 months, she hid the collection beneath her bed. But one day, the sharp, pungent scent gave her away. A guard noticed the unusual odor and searched the room. He found the hidden stash. The retribution was swift and brutal. The physical consequences were severe, leaving her broken and gasping. The guard may not have known her specific plan, but he understood she was preparing for something dangerous. Dolson had witnessed what happened to those who tried to defy them. Now, her only chance at a distraction was gone. Yet she refused to break. She whispered to herself, "I must survive. My father sacrificed everything for my freedom. I cannot end it here." Driven by her past, her elite academic training in chemistry back home, her mind shifted to a new strategy. She thought back to the properties of fine powdered materials. She realized the environment they were working in was filled with microscopic particles suspended in the air. If I can trigger a reaction with these materials, I can create a critical diversion, she calculated. She began waiting for the environmental shift. In this region, the climate changed when the monsoon rains arrived. By May, the skies opened up and the heavy downpour began. She knew from her experience that the relentless, humid atmosphere would affect the stability of the entire facility. She waited for the perfect, heavy storm. Despite the deep humiliation and the shadow of constant surveillance, she remained patient. She was waiting for the moment when the elements would align with her final attempt at escape. She waited and waited. Finally, the moment arrived. She dispersed the fine particles into the heavy, humid air and triggered a single, precise spark. In an instant, a brilliant flash ignited the room. The air itself seemed to erupt. Dolson instinctively shielded herself, dropping to the floor as the shockwave surged through the facility. The aftermath was agony. The searing heat had left its mark on her, but she forced herself to stand through the pain. The facility was plunged into absolute chaos, shrouded in thick, choking smoke. This is the only chance, she realized. She vaulted through a broken window into the rain-slicked night. Behind her, the building was a chaotic haze of light and confusion. She knew she couldn't wait for rescuers. In her past, she had learned that authority figures and those in the shadows often wore the same mask. She ran, but she didn't head for the main road. She plunged into the darkness, moving in the opposite direction, away from any potential line of sight. Then, a pulse of terror struck her. A vehicle was turning into the main gate, the same van that had brought her here. They weren't all inside, she realized with chilling clarity. Driven by the desperate need to live, she pushed through the physical trauma and sprinted toward the rear of the structure. She checked behind her. The thick smoke provided a desperate veil, and no one seemed to be pursuing her yet. They were too preoccupied with the disaster she had orchestrated. She kept running until the terrain began to shift. Ahead of her, the landscape opened up to a vast, dark expanse. A powerful current flowed steadily before her, the Mekong River. She couldn't be certain if this was the Mekong or another branch of the river system, but her instinct was singular. Follow the current, get away from the darkness. The physical toll was immense. The searing pain from her injuries was agonizing, and she knew the water could be a death sentence in her condition. Driven by desperate survival, she tore apart her remaining clothing, binding the fabric tightly around her torso to hold herself together and stem the flow of her pain. It was a frantic, improvised effort. She wasn't thinking of medical logic. She was thinking only of the next breath, the next moment of life. The intensity of the struggle pushed her beyond her limits, and as she reached the riverbank, the world faded into black. She lost consciousness. Time became a void. When she finally drifted back into awareness, the first grey light of dawn was breaking over the water. She looked back toward the industrial site, but the horizon was clear. The smoke had vanished. They will be hunting, she realized, a jolt of adrenaline cutting through her exhaustion. They are already close. In her desperation, she spotted a large, buoyant plastic drum among the debris washed up on the bank. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed hold of the makeshift vessel, clutched it to her chest, and plunged into the cold, rushing water. She was no longer running. She was surrendering herself to the river, hoping it would carry her further than they could ever track. But one of the things that really shocked Dolson was this. After jumping into the water, she had only been drifting for about 15 minutes when she saw the very same riverside landing where she had originally crossed the river. She had only floated downstream for 15 minutes. And yet, somehow, she had ended up right next to the place where she had crossed into Thailand. In fact, if she had driven there from the original crossing point, it would have taken less than 5 minutes. It was practically right next door. She looked at the landing and thought, "What is that?" But by that point, she couldn't go any farther. Her body was in too much pain. She remembered that boats regularly came and went from that area, so she thought, "Someone here has to help me." So she swam toward the landing. And thankfully, someone who appeared to be working there found her. Dolson pleaded for help in Korean. Then she also tried speaking in the Chinese she knew. Fortunately, the person who found her was familiar with North Korean refugees who crossed the river through that area. The moment he saw Dolson, he understood what had happened. He contacted the authorities, and she was eventually taken to a hospital. Through this process, Dolson was thankfully rescued safely. After receiving treatment at the hospital, however, a problem arose. Tests showed that there were still traces of drugs in Soon's system. Because of that, she wasn't immediately able to travel to South Korea or any other country. Instead, she ended up serving approximately 3 years in prison in Thailand. Even while she was incarcerated, though, Soon said she was actually grateful for one thing: she was alive. After all, she had escaped a situation where she could easily have been killed. After about 3 years, she was finally able to apply for refugee status through the South Korean embassy and eventually make her way to South Korea. During that process, there was a pastor who helped Soon tremendously, and it was through that pastor that Soon eventually learned the full truth about what had happened to her. According to what the pastor told her, the people who had taken Soon were either never brokers to begin with, or they may have been brokers who had decided to exploit her. Apparently, North Korean defectors are extremely wary while traveling through China after escaping from North Korea. They have heard so many stories about the dangers they could face that they remain constantly on guard. But once they reach the Mekong River, many of them finally begin to relax. They believe they have made it through the most dangerous part of their journey, and that, according to the pastor, is what makes them so easy to deceive. There were people who would take advantage of that moment of relief and lure them away. Even if those people died while being forced to do whatever the organization wanted, they were already considered non-existent by the outside world. As far as the authorities were concerned, they had already disappeared, and when their physical condition became too poor, some of them could allegedly be used for other criminal purposes. The pastor said that organizations like this were believed to have established bases in the region and that he had heard stories of them targeting North Korean defectors. And that is how this terrifying true story ends, with the horrifying possibility that criminal organizations were preying on North Korean defectors who had already escaped one of the most dangerous situations imaginable.